I will call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council. I am the chair, Councilmember Robert Lilligren, joined by a quorum of the council and lots of folks in the audience today. So good to see you. Thanks for coming down for the meeting. Committee members, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and if there's no additions or changes, we can consider it approved. Hearing none, we have an approved agenda. Next is approval of the minutes of the November 21st, 2022 Community Development Committee meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussions, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries, and we'll move on to our consent agenda. 2 items. One is the City of North St. Paul Density Bonus Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and the other is the City of Rosemount Expansion, SKB Expansion Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. The consent agenda carries, and we'll move on to our 3 non-consent business items. The first is item 2022-327, funding recommendations for the 2022 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Development Grants. And we have Hannah Gary here to present from staff, and we were planning to have Maplewood Mayor Marylee Abrams, who chairs our Livable Communities Advisory Committee, but she is unable to be, so we have the vice chair. Thank you for being here. And is it Mauricio Ochoa?
Yep, that's right.
Wow, thank you. Got it. Welcome, Ms. Gary, Mr. Ochoa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. I'm Hannah Gary, Senior Planner in Community Development, and today I am presenting the funding recommendations for the 2022 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Development Program. I am joined today by the Vice Chair of the Livable Communities Advisory Committee, Mauricio Ochoa. I also want to recognize all of the project teams that are representing the recommended projects are here in the audience today, and thank everyone for taking the time to be here. The Livable Communities Act has several goals that are shared across all of its funding programs. The goals are to create more housing choice across the region, create more living wage jobs, support environmental sustainability through reducing greenhouse gas emissions and conserving natural resources, and to improve regional connections. Finally, an overarching goal of all of the LCA programs is to realize more equitable development outcomes. The LCDA development grants support a variety of projects throughout the region, including mixed-use, affordable housing projects that serve a specific community, creating living wage jobs and supporting economic opportunity, and projects that increase environmental sustainability. As part of the fund distribution plan adopted in March of 2022, Council approved up to $9 million to be allocated through the LCDA development program. In addition to the development funds, $2 million was allocated to pre-development funds. Unallocated pre-development funds were split between LCDA and the LCDA Transit-Oriented Development, or TOD program, giving each program an additional $444,050. This made a total of $9,444,050 available in this round of LCDA development funding. On August 15th, we received 11 LCDA applications. One application from the City of St. Paul was withdrawn before Step 1 scores were finalized. The first round of review is conducted by an interdivisional council team made up of staff from Community Development, Metro Transit, Environmental Services, and Communications. Projects need to meet both an overall minimum score. Oh, it didn't go forward. Oh, it did. Sorry. An overall minimum score and a minimum equity score to advance to the next round of review. 6 of the 10 applications met the minimum score to move forward to the next round of review. The second round of review is done by the Livable Communities Advisory Committee, or the LCAC. This is a 15-member panel of topic area experts who score applications and make the final funding recommendation. The projects are scored on 3 main categories: the what, the how, and the who. The what, or the project outcomes, look at housing, jobs, and economic opportunity, and the level of connectedness in the project, as well as how well the project is supporting environmental sustainability. Within each of these criterion, we are also looking at how well the project will support more equitable development outcomes. The how is the process that the project team is going through to develop the project. Here we're looking at where the need for the project came from, steps the city is taking to address disparities in their city, and the community engagement process. Finally, we're scoring on the project team. We're assessing how well the project team is representing the community the project is intending to serve and identified funding sources. The LCAC is also scoring on the overall approach to equitable development that the project is taking. The recommendation before you today is to award 6 Livable Communities Demonstration Account grants totaling $7,195,000 and to authorize its Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement on behalf of the council. So these are the projects that are being recommended for funding. All projects that advanced to the second round met the minimum score to be eligible to be funded, and the LCAC found value in funding each of the projects. LCDA does have guidance that no more than 40% of the available funds go to projects that are located in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Because only one suburban project met the minimum score in step 1 to move into the next round of funding, the LCAC is making the recommendation to award more than 40% of available funds to projects in Minneapolis and St. Paul in order to award all of the available funding. As you can see in this table, there is an additional $2,249,050 remaining in the LCDA development account. This funding will be recommended to be transferred to the transit-oriented development account to support 2 additional suburban projects. The 2021 grant cycle yielded funding recommendations for 5 suburban projects. We're going to be monitoring the geographic distribution to see if this becomes a trend or if this year is an outlier. We also plan to work with suburban cities to encourage competitive applications and will be assessing our outreach and technical assistance. Our Vice Chair of the LCAC, Mauricio, will now present projects being recommended for funding.
Thank you. Mr. Choi, welcome.
Yep. So we'll start with the Emerson Village. This is a project in the city of Minneapolis. It's a housing project, and we're recommending $750,000 for it. The Emerson Village will bring 40 units of affordable housing to North Minneapolis, with 26 of these units being affordable to those making less than 30% of area median income. The project includes large units for families serving a need that is often unmet. 20 of the units will be set aside for families who are considered high-priority homeless, and another 15% will be set aside for people with disabilities who have incomes below 30% of area median income. So like I said, the recommended amount is $750,000, and this will be used for to support community engagement, general construction, and public art. That's the first project.
So the next project is the Entrepreneurial Market, which is part of the Opportunity Site Development in Brooklyn Center. This project will create, 150 new jobs, 100 of which will be living wage jobs. The goal of the project is support business owners of color, new immigrants, and women, all communities who typically experience more economic disparities. Tenants will have access to technical assistance as part of the market. This project has strong community partnerships, and the project team worked with the business owners to understand what was most needed. In addition to the market space, the project is bringing 278 new housing units. They're requesting $1.5 million to support a large public plaza, and the recommendation is to fully fund the request. Excuse me. This portion of the Upper Harbor project is located in North Minneapolis. This is a project located from the city of Minneapolis. It will bring 190 units of affordable rental housing, as well as 18 affordable ownership units developed by Habitat for Humanity. There will be 6 4-bedroom units and 55 units at or below 30% excuse me, 30% of area median income. The project team is requesting $2 million for stormwater management, enhancing the pedestrian experience, site preparation, playgrounds, and community. Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. I'm getting over a cold. Okay, let's try this again. The project team is requesting $2 million for stormwater management, enhancing the pedestrian experience, site preparation, playgrounds, and community space for the affordable housing portion of the project. The recommendation is to fully fund this request. 30,000 Feet is a Black Arts and Tech Center located in St. Paul. The project will bring youth training and internship programs to the neighborhood, as well as serve as a community gathering space, hosting events that feature Black artists. The project team is reusing a former Sunrise Bank site, bringing new life to a currently unused property. The project team is requesting funding for community engagement, site acquisition, placemaking, and improved connections. We are recommending fully funding this request at $495,000.
Okay, the next project is the 2843 building in Minneapolis. This is a commercial building which has three main tenants, and the goal of this building is to focus on training and business development for entrepreneurs of color. The building will feature the Du Nord brewery space, a community market, and a culinary education space. And the project is anticipated to create 52 new jobs, 47 of which will be full-time living wage jobs. For this project, they're looking for some money for some stormwater management and public gathering space. And this one will be fully funded as well.
So our final project today is a Serenity Senior Care Facility in St. Paul. This is an affordable senior living facility, and it's the first affordable housing rehab project that we have seen in the LCDA program since we opened up eligibility last year. The project will preserve 68 units of affordable housing, including 16 units affordable to residents making at or below 30% of area median income. The renovations include upgrading building systems and enhancing the community space. We're recommending fully funding this project at $1,950,000. So once again, the funding recommendation before you today is to award 6 Livable Communities Demonstration Account grants totaling $7,195,000 and to authorize its Community Development Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you for your time, and we will now take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gary. Mr. Toya, committee members, questions on the report? Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question too, because we didn't have, or we had extra funding that wasn't subscribed or applied for in the program. The committee decided to then apply more than 40% to projects so that they would be fully funded. Is 40% kind of an advisory amount that we do and we can deviate from that obviously because of the recommendation? Or, and I remember working on these policies and some of this framework, but remind me again why the 40% was established.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Councilmember. So the 40% has been in place to ensure that there's not a disproportionate amount of funding going to the core cities, since there tends to be more development and more applications from those core cities. From my understanding, and Director Barajas, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is a general guidance that the council has put in place. And in my time at the council, we have, the committee has recommended going against that 40-60 split in the past when there is funding available to ensure fully funding all the projects.
And Councilmember Johnson, I have the same question of Director Barajas, and on the LCDA account, it's an internal policy. It's not statutory. Director Barajas, do you know?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. For TBRA, the statute has that limitation when a guidance when the program is oversubscribed, that we shouldn't distribute that, and we've applied that through our fund distribution plan as guidance for the remainder of our programs to ensure that similar distribution. In this case, we aren't oversubscribed, though.
And Mr. Chair, just a couple more
Please,
follow-up questions.
Councilmember
Thank
Johnson.
you. And so I know too, it says in the report that we offered technical assistance sessions. Were those well attended and by both inner city and suburban cities? Do you know?
Yeah,
was
thank you,
great.
Chair, Council Member. That's a good question. So we held, we had topic area sessions in 2021, and since our scoring didn't change much from 2021 to this year, all of those sessions were available on our website that we encouraged applicants to review the recordings. And then this year we held kind of more of like a very technical session on how to fill out the application, what steps do you need to go through, as well as had sessions from previous project teams talking about what worked well for them, kind of tips for success. They were well attended. I don't have the exact attendance breakdown off the top of my head, but that's something that I could look back at to see if we have those records of who attended the webinars to be able to get a better sense of who is on the call. But it typically is a mix of city staff, developers, or others who are just interested in learning more about the programs.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just one more quick question. And then just looking at the projects that weren't recommended for funding, I mean, these are suburban projects. And, you know, for having been seated on this committee for almost 4 years now and having been on the city side of things, you know, one of our goals is to try to really make sure that we can work with these communities in a positive way to help them get funding to help accomplish the region's goals and the city's goals. And I see the reasons why they didn't meet the criteria. I would say that in the case of the city of Plymouth, which of course I'm a former city official, and this very site, Four Seasons, is very, very familiar to me because it's been one that's been looked at for a long time for redevelopment, which would include affordable housing and some really good cleanup on site, and it's a blighted site, and it's been very difficult to find developers on the site. I know the city is moving forward. They finally decided to buy the site and get control of the site, which is very important. But it concerns me too that there are hurdles, of course, for suburban cities to get over as well. And as I read some of these reasons why the suburban communities might not have met, you know, again, the goals that we're setting in our program, it concerns me because this is, again, a group of cities that we're trying to work with, and they might not be reaching the, as in the case of Four Seasons, affordable housing proposed does not address the income band in the greatest need in the city. Well, I have to try to live in both worlds, and these are just comments, and I'll support the recommendations tonight, but moving forward, I know it is very difficult for the city of Plymouth to get 30% AMI. I know there is a great focus on workforce housing at or above 50 or even 80% AMI, but because the greatest needs are at 30% AMI with the county and with the Met Council, which I support, I'm getting concerned that our suburban communities that are trying to really push forward and get what they can, even though it might not meet our full criteria, that again, they lose out on funding even when we're not fully subscribed. So I appreciate that we're pushing more than 40% into, you know, the inner city communities, but I would also like to see an effort where, you know, we can help these communities get projects, you know, to ribbon cutting and moving people in. And I know there's some mixed use with here too. So I don't know, again, if these communities participated in the assistance, the technical assistance sessions, or what we do to reach out and help them along the way, or if we can bring them back. And I also noticed that our applications were down from a previous year, an anomaly or not. So, I mean, I guess I'm, you know, again, I'll support this recommendation, but we talk often about helping our suburban communities. And there's got to be a way when we're not subscribed fully that we can maybe have some sort of a tier 2, well, you know, if not this, then what? Because these projects, like all of you know, are on a very tight timeline, and you can so easily lose other funding that you might have. You can so easily lose somebody who's in control of the site. In the city of Plymouth's case, it's the city itself finally, because probably for 15 years they couldn't get a developer that could stick long enough. And they're also probably in many of these cases trying to get cleanup grants and maybe run TIF or whatever. So, you know, I'm just gonna, I'll vote for this tonight, but boy, oh boy, here's a case where we're moving forward, we're going outside of our policy, which we can do at the 40%. And unfortunately, we've got suburban communities who are not participating in this wonderful opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. No, thanks for that insight. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, I know we've been monitoring how well we are meeting the criteria for the Livable Community Grants, doing the outreach, continuing to do that, identifying best practices, starting with those organizations that were able to successfully meet the criteria and make it work. So I'd like to know more about, how we can highlight the successes, particularly for suburban communities like Brooklyn Center, that might be able to be duplicated for other suburban communities. I'm very excited about the fact that we're able to utilize those funds for the other projects that were in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis and St. Paul. The number of jobs that were created, I don't even know what the total number is, but that is something to be very happy about, as well as the number of affordable housing units that have been created, and the fact that we were not just going to sit on that, and just looking at these projects, knowing how they're going to benefit the communities is a great opportunity, and well done in being creative, but lots more to do in terms of continuous improvement. How can we learn from what's working to make sure that we can meet the livable community goals? Because as we know, the longer we wait and let that gap about livable community, affordable housing units and things like that, that gap just gets bigger. So I'm very happy to see that. And I'm very proud that we're able to, have such a variety of projects to help create more businesses as well. So there's a multiplying factor that I'm seeing in some of these projects that we won't recognize right away, but we'll see it in the future. So maybe highlighting some of those things. I'd also like to see, what the cities have seen in terms of the scoring process, in terms of, what they saw online, and take a look at that, being involved with Judy and Councilmember Lilligren with the housing criteria and some of the LCA criteria. It's just something that we want to continue to work on. We see progress, and hopefully we'll see more of that. And I'm looking to see all of these projects get off the ground. There have been many years of planning, and some of them gotten off the ground quicker than others, which is even greater, that they can work with the staff to bring forward projects that are going to transform these communities.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have in queue Councilmembers Lindstrom, Vento, and then Wolf. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you for spelling out why the 4 projects did not go forward. I'm curious to know if they did not meet the minimum score or if they did not meet the minimum equity score. And I'm also just curious, Mr. Ochoa, if there was any conversation within the advisory committee about just sort of an evaluation of the changes we made last year, and whether or not this is just a 1-year point in time, and you mentioned, Ms. Carey, that we'll monitor it moving forward, or if there's any sort of feedback from the advisory committee at this point. Thanks.
2 questions. Ms. Gary, do you want to start, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councilmember Lindstrom. So to answer the first question, the projects did not meet either the minimum overall score or the minimum equity score. So I've had conversations with a couple of the applicant teams, and when projects don't move forward, we always offer the opportunity to talk through why the project didn't move forward, offer recommendations for the future. In terms of continuous improvement, monitoring, evaluation, this is something that I personally am incredibly interested in. We do an annual survey every year so that we can assess both our internal process, how easy was it for applicants to apply? Did they understand the application? I've also started doing focus groups with applicants to understand, do our criteria make sense to them? Are they too technical? We are very deep in these criteria, so it's easy to miss things. So we're trying to get a lot more information from our applicants on how they're experiencing our process. With our timing, we try to wait until all of the awards have been made before we send out a survey or before we do focus groups, so there's not any kind of pressure there or applicants feel like they have to answer one way because we're still holding the funding recommendation. So there is a bit of a lag there. Currently, we're in the process of developing our funding plan for 2023. So the recommendations that we get now will help inform what we put forward for 2024. But that's very much something that we are integrating more into our work to have more of a mindset of continuous improvement and continuing to work with all of our applicants to better understand where those barriers exist, where there are funding gaps, and what we can do to be most responsive to what applicants need. And Mauricio, if you want to answer.
Sure. So the question was, how does the advisory committee feel about the changes since last year? And to be honest with you, this was a difficult year. So I've done it a few years, and this year, because there were less projects, we couldn't flex all those restraints that we had or all those changes that we've had. So we ended up funding most of the projects. So it's kind of difficult to answer the question. I will say that some stuff that was appreciated by the advisory committee was including rehab. Because I know that's a conversation that we had before where we can't just keep building, we also have to maintain what we have. And we really appreciate the emphasis that staff has on equity. And having that as a unique scoring criteria helps us differentiate projects in more than one way.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstrom?
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Vento?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about the Serenity Care site at Humboldt. I, in a previous career, worked for 5 years for Assumption Catholic Church in downtown St. Paul, and part of my responsibilities was helping coordinate support for our parishioners or their family members who were living in assisted living elder care facilities. And I've had an opportunity to visit 3 of Serenity's sites, Humboldt, White Bear Lake, and Mounds Park. And I just can't thank you enough for seeing this as a valuable investment of good money. Elder care is very, very expensive. Any kind of assisted living, it doesn't have to be just for the elderly, is very, very expensive. And I have been through tough decisions with several family members on this issue and have kind of now become an unpaid consultant for my college roommates as they deal with this with their loved ones. And I'll tell you, I just feel for people because it's very, very difficult finding the right fit. And many times family members aren't real happy about going into these facilities. So I hope that this will spark an interest among other senior care and assisted living sites. And I also hope that each of these sites will realize that probably their most valuable asset is their employees, and that they will do everything they can to recruit and retain them and know what a tremendous difference they make in the lives, not only of the people who live in their facilities, but those of us who go to visit them and care about them. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been through this process a lot of times, so I have a lot of basis of comparison. And I expressed some frustration in the spring when we were coming up with our criteria for this year. We didn't have time to do a deep evaluation on how things had gone the previous year, and it seems like every year we get on the same hamster wheel. We just get the awards out, and then it's time to approve the plan for the next year, and we never get, only once in all the time that I've been here in the past, almost 14 years, have we been able to take a deep dive at what was going on. And I warned in the spring that this was going to concentrate things in a small area of the region, and I really hate when I'm right because it means I saw a problem and nobody listened to me. And to me, that is a problem, that we're not being accessible to much of the region. They've just given up on applying in many cases, and in some, like the Akron and 145th probably would have been funded on other evaluation scenarios before we made all of the changes in the last 2 years. Getting docked points because you don't have a strong engagement process when you've owned the property for before all of the other stuff around there was built. You know, they had a big, you know, property and a long-term plan to do this, bought it right away, people put up houses around it and knew that that was there. It's kind of a waste of money to have a big engagement process when you already had that in place all the way along. And I had been trying to get Dakota County to apply. They said, we don't bother because it's a lot of work and we never get approved anyway, so it's not worth the effort for something that, and nobody disagrees on Dakota CDA doing excellent work, you know. But because of the way we have the scoring now, they didn't get approved. Four Seasons has been blighted since I was in high school, and I'm really old. So that couldn't get anything to go. I mean, I remember going there when I was a senior in high school. That was 1982 or 83, and it looked bad then. So this is a place that really needs some help, but it couldn't score under our current situation. I would love to see that project have anything happen to it because it's been waiting for a very, very long time. I'm not saying that any of the projects that got funded aren't good projects, but saying that we get to put a lot more into Minneapolis and St. Paul because the other projects weren't good enough is problematic to me because we haven't had a good chance to chew over what the impact of those scoring changes have been. And we're turning down at least 2 good projects in the process. I'm actually gonna vote no today because it happened exactly what I said. And I've looked at your other slides that you have. You have one that shows this year's award after your question slide. And then there's one that shows the last 2 years of awards. But even there, look at the red square. There's big parts of the region that aren't even on the map because they're not possible in getting awards. If we want to have affordable housing all over the region, then we have to have eligibility all over the region for places to get served. So I know the rest of you are going to vote for this and it's going to go through and get funded, but I'm just saying I told you so. And if you don't care and you want all the money to go to just a few select cities, then we'll keep doing what we've been doing. But I'm trying to raise awareness that this is damaging for the program because part of the strength of the program is that it's available to everybody in the region.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I've asked Director Barajas to address the issue of the evaluation and the timeline, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, certainly we hear you on evaluation. It's important to us as well. In the first year, as you know, when you have one data point, it's not a whole lot to go on. And we continue to work on different strategies so we can engage all those who both apply and don't receive funding, but also for those who aren't applying. And we also have work to do in recruiting additional eligible communities who had participated in the last cycle who haven't re-enrolled quite yet. Some of them are closing up their comp plans, so we're a little behind in that, but still working on additional recruitment. So some parts of the map you will see aren't actually eligible because they haven't re-enrolled. Some of them just aren't eligible, period, because they're outside of our service area. But there are certainly opportunities for us over the coming both closing out this cycle to evaluate this process, but to also put in a further evaluation of what should this look like, what should evaluation look like, what issues do we want to address. So we're definitely taking in everything that you're sharing with us and our own experiences with the program to build what that evaluation plan will look like. We want to make some changes, as I know staff have been working on those, and we'll be bringing those conversations to you for the fund distribution plan. That will be kind of what we've been hearing in the process, but we want to do a broader, deeper evaluation on the bigger picture of what's working and what isn't working across this program. So we look forward to the conversation with you.
Councilmember Wolf, anything else? Having queue, council members Vento, Chambliss, and Cummings, then Johnson. Councilmember Vento.
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Chambliss.
I'm trying to, get over the statement that I heard about us not caring. I'm gonna just get over that, and thank you for the response that we're gonna be following up on everything that we've heard today, and then folks will continue to work to support livable communities. That's all I got to say at this point.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have a lot to add that's new and different from what's being said here, but I think what's being said here is just really, really critical and informative. And I think a couple of things that sort of stuck out to me is, we'll see if this is an aberration. That means then we go through another cycle and then see if it happens again, and then we know, oh, I guess it wasn't an aberration, it's a pattern we need to look. So, and I appreciate what you said about looking now and so forth. One of the things that I'm wondering about is you said we send a survey out, and a survey is fine, but if it's after the fact, it doesn't really help advance the ball at all. And if we had good turnout at the various discussions about how the program worked, technical advisory, all of those things, and those people don't apply, there is a reason. And it doesn't really help to find out what the reason is after the awards have been made. But we need to be contacting and saying, gee, you were here and here and here, and you got all this information, and yet you chose not to apply. Can we find out why? And what can we do to get you to apply? Because I think that's a concern, huge concern. Councilmember Wolf did say, here's the scenario that's going to play out, as she has done many times with her historical perspective, and I appreciate that, thank you. But to say, well, we don't apply because we never get approved, that's alarming. And I do think that and to have funds left over, so much so that it can be changed from 40% to whatever. Every one of these projects is outstanding. There's no question about that. They're deserving, it's wonderful, and so forth. But again, the time that is involved in now waiting for the next round and trying to get funding again is really concerning. And especially for the communities that are less able or less apt or less whatever to apply, we need to bring them into the fold. That is our responsibility. And we need to figure out what we're doing or what we're not doing that isn't happening. So I think a deep dive really quickly is really appropriate. I appreciate all of the work that goes into this. I really, really do. Not to dismiss that in any way, shape, or form. But I'm just saying somehow it isn't working the way it is intended to work. And we need to figure that out sooner rather than later. That's
Thank
all
you,
I have.
Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson, then Councilmember
Thank you, Mr.
Wilson.
Chair. Thank you, Councilmember Cummings, because most of what you said was what I was going to add. I really appreciate that perspective, and I want to acknowledge that Councilmember Wolf, had a good gut instinct on this from experience, I'm sure. So my question is this, twofold. The first part is, okay, we've got some cities that aren't quite there where they need to be with this new criteria that we've set forward. So with a little bit of hindsight, we have communities across the region that have great will. That's important. Without will and the political strength to push forward on extremely difficult projects and difficult sites, nothing happens. So we have cities here that are trying. I worry, though, that this is another chilling effect on those communities. And why bother when the bar is so high for them, they can't get there. So there's that. I also think that some cities have been doing this a lot longer, perhaps, with their own internal goals that were more advanced, that now meet our goals, or there's synergy between city goals and our goals, and they're good at this. There are communities, I will just say like Plymouth, that I think, it has its own HRA. Every affordable housing project that I was on the council for 20 years got approved. Some of it was a little difficult sometimes just because of the funding needed and the cycles, and some of the folks who weren't too thrilled about it, but there were more people supporting it than not. But because perhaps they aren't quite there on the equity score, or they aren't quite there on another score, a really great project that has some good affordable housing in a community that we're actually trying to expand options for people on voucher systems and so forth to gain access to those communities where there are great paying jobs and pretty good schools. So it's frustrating to me. And I would say to the committee, you did a great job because you followed exactly what we asked you to do. So no complaints there. But I'm nervous because a year cycle, it doesn't turn on a dime. This is a data point, but we have data points that also show that for the most part, you know, the inner cities are better at this, and that's great. That's not a complaint. That's a good thing. The need is great everywhere, however. So I want to know, how do we keep these proposals that are in the queue but just didn't get across the finish line? And is there a way to take the remaining funds and extend what we're trying to do to help those suburban communities in one way or another not totally lose place? Because again, timing is so important on these projects. And a whole thing, I have 4 seasons, thank you, because you were in the area before I showed up. But it's something that, you know, I think we're probably going on a total of 3 decades where the mall itself started to, you know, not be cared for and fall into blight, serious blight. But the location is perfect, and as are all of these, right? So I just want to know, how do we keep them in queue and keep them incented and keep them at the table so that they finally just don't go, you know, this is just getting hard, and we want to get to these places, but we aren't there yet. I mean, how do we recognize that? That to me, the political will, and they're in the process. How do we keep them there so that next year those projects are gone? They didn't make it across the finish line and they're just gone. Probably Dakota County might be able to keep it alive, you know, with the CDA, I don't know, but that's my concern. And I'm going on tonight because I just know how hard all of these communities, and I will say especially the suburban communities, I'm looking at the city of Edina too. I know what they've been trying to do, really good things, we know that. So I know not everybody can get funded, but in this case, it's a criteria that we put in place a year ago that we're testing. It's good, but we're testing it. And I'm now seeing a disparity between which cities are at the same place. Not everybody's maybe at the same starting blocks when we say go, but there are people in the race. So what do we do with the money that's not allocated, and can this be, you know, hopefully there's a way to keep it in play so that we don't have to lose more time.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for the question. I've asked Director Barajas to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, the second item on your agenda for additional recommendations is also where we're recommending pulling in some of this additional funds to fund projects in the TOD, because these come out of the same pot of funds. So that's where those dollars would come into play. And as Hannah had mentioned earlier, whenever we have applicants that aren't making minimum scores, that is what our staff are working on with them, or calling and working with them and offering to work with them on making competitive applications in future years. That's part of the work that they're doing over the course of the year, in between funding cycles and getting applicants ready for the next cycle as well. We certainly don't want to lose track, because we do recognize, especially for some of our smaller communities or with smaller staff or infrequent applicants, how hard that hurdle is to get over. So reaching out with them and working with them. I even just recall when I first came to the council many years ago now, when I was but a babe of young age. One of my first meetings was with actually City of Maplewood, and working on some applications that they had for the what they used to call the Gladstone neighborhood. It's now I can't remember what it was called, but they didn't get funded in the first cycle, and we worked through a couple of different options and talked through different ways of meeting our criteria back then, and they've since received and are actually, I think, even have a proposal on the TOD program this evening. So just kind of an example of working through that is something that we don't just do as individuals, but also bring some of our other staff to the table to discuss those options of how we meet these criteria. It's not always easy, as you know, as different criteria, different funding cycles, different competition in different years can all play a role in that. And certainly in this year with with fewer applications than we typically see, and certainly the costs for projects going up more than what people are expecting. We're acutely aware of how that can impact projects.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Barajas. I appreciate all that. It explains things, but I want to look prospectively because I'm concerned. You know, I was hoping that some of what we had put together in this criterion framework would help, and it isn't. And again, like I mentioned, not only on this program, but in many ways, whether it's comp planning, some of our smaller communities in the suburbs have a very difficult time, and we put grants out there. But I meet with my small community mayors, and they're like, it's not even close. We are still struggling, right? So all in all, I mean, again, I will support this tonight with a qualified. I'm disappointed that it could include more of our suburban communities where we have been talking about trying to get them into this. I don't think it's, it serves the region equitably from a geographic standpoint when, again, we're trying to give people more choices on where to live throughout the region, and yet we see clearly that where our funding is going is within the big cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, something that we're always trying to be aware of, that things aren't out of balance, and tonight I feel like they are.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Musse.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand concerns that some of my colleagues here expressed, but I just want to say that I'm really impressed with recommended projects. They are just inclusive, equitable projects, and they will advance equity in our region, from large family housing to youth employment to cultural, commercial spaces. So I'm really super happy with the outcome. At the same time, I share your concerns, and we should be more inclusive moving forward. But I want to thank you, the staff and the team, for really recommending such amazing projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion? Councilmember Chambliss, and then I think I'll call for a motion.
Yeah, that's fine.
Councilmember
Just
Chambliss.
one last comment, and yeah, I agree with Councilmember Musse. These are great projects that were funded. We have a lot of work to do in terms of getting equity across the region. It is not going to happen in 1 year or 2 or maybe even 3 years. This is something that we're going to have to continue to put our heads together on and work and try to get balance in the communities. I've attended many community meetings over the years where people hear that an affordable housing complex is coming in their community and they fight against it. So it's not just what we're doing at the Metropolitan Council, or it's not necessarily even just the applicant that is preventing projects that meet our LCA score. It's something that we need to look deeply at, not just at one entity, the Met Council, or even just the applicant, but we need to look at what is going to work to get our livable communities in place and active and breathing and visible and vibrant. And this is where it starts. I think we've made a good start with getting some very profitable projects off the ground that are going to make a huge impact on housing and jobs. But our work has to continue to look at how can we get more equity in the region, throughout the region, in the suburbs and the cities. It is not going to be easy.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? We can move to a motion. Great. And just to those who assembled and those who may be listening, you hear this conversation tonight. I would say housing and affordable housing are the most robust debates and conversations that we have here. We have a internal process as well. We start tee up these kinds of policy issues. We're grappling with them. Things don't change overnight, as Councilmember Chambliss says, and all these are great points. And I really feel this whole committee for sure, but the council that we serve with is committed to equity, including geographic equity. And so it's something that we need to continue working on. And as we're sort of in the twilight of this first 4-year term on the council, I expect the next council, whoever they are, will continue this robust conversation and continue trying to improve processes. And then we have so many folks here who are representing some of these projects. And so if I could just ask you to raise your hand if you're part of this first 6 projects that have been presented and are being awarded development grants today. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with it. We all know these projects can take forever to put together, and every little bit of funding helps. So we're happy to be partners with you. And Ms. Gary proposed that the Met Council awards 6 Livable Communities Demonstration Account grants, as shown in Table 1, totaling $7,195,000, and to authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Councilmember. Second. Discussion on the motion? Discussion. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Abstentions? Great, that carries. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we will move on to our next non-consent business item. It's another funding recommendation for the 2022 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants. Mr. Klimek is here, and as well as Vice Chair Ochoa. Mr. Klimek, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, good evening. Again, I'm Stephen Klimek, a Senior Planner in Community Development, and I'm here presenting the funding recommendations for the 2022 LCDA TOD, Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants, also joined by Vice Chair of the LCAC, Mauricio Ochoa, and many project teams also from our applicant pool, and want to thank them for being here. The Livable Communities Act has several goals that are shared between all of our programs. The goals are to create more housing choice across the region, create more living wage jobs, support environmental sustainability through reducing greenhouse gas emissions and conserving natural resources, and to improve regional connections. And finally, an overarching goal of all LCA programs is to realize more equitable development outcomes. Additionally considered, the Council's TOD policy is to promote moderate to high density development projects located within walking distance of major transit stops, and typically include a mix of uses such as housing, jobs, restaurants, shops, and entertainment. The LCDA TOD program advances all of these goals and policies by supporting dense, diverse development that emphasizes pedestrian activity and increases transit ridership and multimodal transportation. There's a variety of project types that help do this, including high-density and mixed-use developments, affordable housing, projects that include public infrastructure, development supporting economic opportunity and job creation, as well as community destinations and cultural hubs. The LCDA TOD program provides targeted funds for those types of development projects near all the different types of modes of high-frequency transit that we have in the region. And those TOD areas are located throughout the region's transit network and are eligible to cities that elect to meet LCA requirements, which include participating in the Local Housing Incentives Program and establishing goals for affordable housing and life cycle housing. There are currently 76 LCA participating cities in the 7-county region. We have 31 that have TOD eligible station areas. And as part of the Fund Distribution Plan, or the FDP, adopted in March of 2022, the Council approved $5 million for the LCDA TOD Development Grant Program. Additional funds are available for the 2022 grants from funding that was not awarded in this year's pre-development and LCDA grant programs. So the resulting total available for LCDA TOD is $7,693,100. The 2022 program began in March when the FDP was adopted and a notice of funding availability was issued to participating communities. To support prospective applicants, staff conducted informational webinars and hosted new technical assistance webinars for these specific LCA grant programs. Applications were due on August 15th. The Step 1 review, conducted by an interdivisional set of council staff, used criteria approved by the council in the FDP. And the Step 2 was conducted by the Livable Communities Advisory Committee, or LCAC, in October and November. Today, the LCAC is recommending funding for 7 projects, and committee action today will go before the full council on December 14th. On August 15th, 9 LCDA TOD applications were received from 7 cities. They were reviewed by staff for completeness and eligibility before moving into this 2-step evaluation process. Step 1, again, conducted by council staff with different subject matter expertise. And in the first step, applicants must meet a minimum score of 42 points and a minimum equity score to advance into the Step 2. 8 of the 9 applications met this threshold. And in the Step 2 review conducted by LCAC, the 15-member external review committee, those projects must score at least 75 points to be considered for funding, and 7 of the 8 applications met this threshold. The applications are evaluated in 3 main categories between the 2-step evaluation process: the what, the how, and the who of the proposed project, and within which the Step 1 and Step 2 evaluate criteria across the topics of housing, jobs, compact connected development, environment and livability, process, team, and equitable development. The scoring process has resulted in a funding recommendation from the LCAC that the Metropolitan Council awards 7 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants totaling $7,693,100, and to authorize this Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Given that recommendation, this table is a summary of all 9 LCDA TOD applications. It's an adaptation of Table 3 in the business item. And LCAC is recommending full funding for 5 and partial funding for 2 of the 9 submitted applications. And the funding recommendation awards all $7,693,100 of available funding. The 7 projects recommended for award are from the City of Brooklyn Center, City of Maplewood, City of Minneapolis, the City of St. Louis Park, and the City of St. Paul. These applications received scores above the minimum point thresholds to be eligible for funding and are recommended based on their scoring rank. The funding recommendation takes into account a $2 million award limit per city, and therefore 1 application from the City of Minneapolis was not recommended for its full funding award because the award limit had been reached. And from Figure 1 in the business item, the 7 projects recommended for funding, again, located in Brooklyn Center, Maplewood, Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, and St. Paul. These projects are situated in station areas of the Green Line Extension, the Purple Line, Orange Line, the C Line, and the D Line. And with that, Mauricio and I will now provide a brief overview of each of the recommended projects.
Okay, so we saw this one in the previous funding recommendation, but this is another aspect of the Brooklyn Center opportunity site. For this one, we're looking, we were asked to give $2 million for a project along the Metro C line, the full amount that they requested. So this is the initial development subphase that will start a 16-acre phase 1 of the city's larger 80-acre opportunity site redevelopment. This project includes an event center, which will include 24-hour childcare academic learning center in one of the buildings, and then the other building is affordable housing with 60 units developed by PPL. The second building will include 44 units at 50% AMI and 16 units at 30% AMI. And this building is intended to be family building with 75% of the units containing 2 or more bedrooms. For this project, the project team is asking for money for affordable housing, site prep, pedestrian experience, public infrastructure, and placemaking.
The next recommended project is from the City of Maplewood's application, a $1 million request for the Gladstone Crossing project. The recommended funding is for a full award. Gladstone Crossing includes 40 units of deeply affordable housing that will serve low-income families at 30 to 50% AMI, and a priority and focus on young families, parents ages 18 to 26 with children. There's a mix of bedroom sizes to accommodate different family sizes, and additionally there are 20 units set aside for high-priority homeless families, and 6 units set aside for families who qualify for persons with disability units. The remaining 14 units are for other homeless families whose homeless status does not align with the MHFA definition of the high-priority homeless. And the project will include supportive services provided by Solid Ground, and this is in close proximity to the future Purple Line at Frost Avenue and the Bruce Bento Regional Trail. The proposed grant uses are for general affordable housing construction.
So this project is one that we reviewed last year, and this year we had the opportunity to fund fully. They are asking for $1.5 million for a project at 3030 Nicollet. The 3030 Nicollet project is a mixed-use redevelopment of the former Wells Fargo Bank at Nicollet and Lake Street, which was damaged during the civil unrest of 2020. It is one of 2 phases. Phase 1 will include 110 units of high-quality affordable housing. a new Wells Fargo, affordable commercial condominiums, and a business incubator for BIPOC entrepreneurs. There was a lot of community engagement that went into this project, and it is expected to create 39 full-time jobs, 19 living waging jobs, and they also provide condo ownership for BIPOC for the BIPOC community, so that they can profit from the commercial activity that happens here. For this project, they are looking to use it in site preparation, affordable housing, and renewable energy.
The last City of Minneapolis application is a $1 million request for the Zara project. The recommended funding is a partial award of $500,000. The Zara project is designed as an all-inclusive wellness hub and destination place in North Minneapolis that will provide affordable retail and service spaces for African-American women entrepreneurs and business owners within the wellness, food, and professional services industries. The project will include 20 commercial condos, 20 commercial wellness and service suites, an event space, and public plaza, and is expected to create 38 living wage jobs. The grant uses are for site preparation, placemaking, and public art, and public infrastructure utilities. The City of St. Louis Park application is a $1.5 million request for the Wooddale Station project. The recommended funding is a partial award of $747,600. And this mixed-use development is located immediately south of the Green Line LRT Extension's Wooddale Station and consists of 2 buildings with 315 residential units, 13,000 square feet of affordable commercial space, and outdoor public amenity space. 69 units are designated for senior housing. 10% of the units are affordable at 50% AMI, and 10% of the units are affordable at 60% AMI. And these grant uses will be for site acquisition. The first of 2 City of Minneapolis, or City of St. Paul applications, excuse me, is a $445,500 request for the Keystone Community Services Project. The recommended funding is for a full award. The Keystone Community Services is creating a 20,000 square foot community food center to consolidate their food shelf operations and mobile food distribution programs into a single transit-oriented location. The project includes grocery store style shopping for culturally specific foods, space for supportive services and community events, mobile food services, and warehousing. The site was selected as a result of community engagement and will increase the efficiencies and streamline processes for annually receiving and distributing over 4 million pounds of food. And this would double Keystone's capacity to create economic opportunity and serve over 50,000 people. Their grant uses will be for public infrastructure utilities, stormwater management, placemaking spaces, and public art.
And the second St. Paul project that we recommended funding is the Kimball Court. We're recommending full funding for this project. The Kimball Court is the renovation and expansion of an existing affordable housing community that will preserve and enhance a critical housing resource for individuals who experience homelessness in the St. Paul Midway neighborhood. The redevelopment preserves 76 units and adds 22 new units at 30% AMI, which while also expanding the program, office, and amenity spaces to serve the residents. And they are looking for just general construction funds for this project.
And so this scoring process, again, has yielded a funding recommendation that the Metropolitan Council award 7 Livable Communities Demonstration Account transit-oriented development grants totaling $7,698,100 and authorizes Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. And with that, we're happy to stand for questions.
Thank you for your work, and thanks for the report. And Mr. Choi, if you also carry back to the LCAC, our thanks for the work that you do on this. I know this kind of work is very specialized and detailed and takes a lot of time, and we're grateful for the committee's work. Discussion on this report? I think we might have discussed all the relevant points to the last item, so I appreciate that, committee members. Seeing no discussion, the recommendation is that we award 7 Livable Communities Demonstration Account Transit-Oriented Development Grants totaling $7,693,100 and to authorize the Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Is there a motion?
I can move.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. And then I should ask as well, so if you're here on one of the projects that were just awarded transit-oriented development grants, please, yeah. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your partnership. Good luck with your projects.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Johnson.
I just want to do a shout out to a former City of Plymouth employee, Danette Parr, who is our Community and Economic Development Director, and she's been with us for a long time, but today is her first day in the city of Maplewood. So it was hard to see her leave our fair city, but super excited for her and, of course, the city of Maplewood. Good job today. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. And committee members, we'll move on to our final non-consent business item for the evening. It's item 2022-330. It's a clarification for the joint powers agreement with Minnesota Housing on our grant for naturally occurring affordable housing impact fund. Director Barajas will present. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. For the record, Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of Community Development. I have a short item that I hope can we move through quickly today as we've been working through a joint powers agreement authorization that we had from the council in 2018. We were finding that some of our attachments that accompanied that business item led to some conflict in what the business action intent was and how we had been proceeding. The intent of this program was, or of this particular joint powers agreement, was to work with Minnesota Housing to provide funding to the NOAA Impact Fund to make strategic acquisitions as part of their overall funding program. They're getting ready for the phase 2 portion of that as we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's and finding that in the council's original business item, an attachment to the business item referred to how the fund typically operates and repays its investors as part of that, and our intent at the council was to have this be provided as a grant. So we're asking for that clarification, as you can see in the proposed action, to just provide that clarity that this was intended to be a grant, so that we have official action and not just staff's memory of a conversation at the council or a video thereof, but to make that official so that we can finish up and close out this particular joint powers agreement. So the proposed action, since I don't have it on the screen for you today, I will just read that, is to affirm the council's authorization in business item number 2018-286, which authorized the regional administrator to negotiate and the chair to execute a joint exercise of powers agreement with the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, Minnesota Housing, to provide a $1.4 million grant for program support to the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund for the Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Impact Fund. And number 2, to further clarify that there will be no expectation of repayment of the grant subject to annual reporting requirements and the use of grant funds consistent with the terms and conditions of the grant agreement.
Thank you, Director Barajas. So just to be clear, we're clarifying, we're not changing any of the provisions of the original agreement. Question or discussion, Councilmember Wolf, then Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to get my head around, I was never expecting us to be paid back, but is that normally a revolving fund where it keeps getting paid back and used again?
Director Barajas.
Mr. Chair, council members, my understanding is that the investors actually receive their money in return after a certain amount. They do act, this is gonna get a little bit beyond my understanding because this is not an action that I had originally brought to the council, but my predecessor had. But yes, my understanding is that it's an investment fund that the Greater Minnesota Housing Finance Group operates. They bring in banks that also support that fund, and then they make strategic acquisitions for around naturally occurring affordable housing. The mechanisms of how the fund works, I do not know as deeply as I'd like, but I do know that their intent is to repay funds to their investors as they recoup and sell these houses, get money back into the fund, and then they pay back their investors over time. I think it's a 10 to 15-year repayment period, essentially, that they put out sometimes earlier, sometimes later. But yes, we had intended to just provide a grant as part of that.
And Sarah behind you is nodding, so I think you're...
Great, she knows more about it than I do.
Councilmember Wolf.
Okay, so I'm still trying to understand, if we're making the grant, who benefits from the grant? Somebody that they bought the property, or do they pay back the fund and it keeps going? Or does our money end up going to the other investors and they make money off of us, you know? I don't want that to happen.
Mr. Chair, council member, that's a great question, and our understanding in conversations with the folks managing the NOAA Impact Fund is that it would just keep revolving in the fund and being reinvested back into the fund for additional acquisition and not get repaid to others.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question. Yeah, thank you. Further discussion or questions on the action? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks. I was surprised to learn that the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund funds projects like this within the 7-county metropolitan area. I always assumed, had a very 30,000-foot view of what they were all about, but I assumed, based on their name, that they would not be operating in the metropolitan area. And so do they operate all throughout the metropolitan area, the 7-county area, or not?
Director Barajas.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Listrom, you're correct. It makes it sound like they're only in Greater Minnesota, but they do operate across the state, the entire state of Minnesota. In our grant agreements with them, we would be focusing that, with a stipulation that our funds can only be used in the 7-county metro, but yes, they do a variety of programs across the state.
Could be in Scott County, could be in downtown Minneapolis, or wherever. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Johnson.
And Mr. Chair, to that point, because I worked very closely with the CEO of the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, as I did with the Family Housing Fund CEO, which Councilmember Cummings served on their board. But they, actually, the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund has done some fabulous work too in trying to retain affordable apartment complexes that could be flipped, upgraded, and then people, are displaced. So they've done some really great work across the state and in the metro area in concert with the Family Housing Fund, and then, of course, Minnesota Housing. The second point is to Councilmember Wolf's point. Again, the money will stay and continue to do work. Is there any way that we can just put a line in somewhere that, explicitly says that, so we don't say it's our intention that it will, or we believe that it will, but just to really just get it in writing?
Director Barajas.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember, absolutely, we can say that our expectation is that our funds will be reinvested into
Yes.
the fund, yes.
Could we say we require?
To the extent that we continue to receive reporting from them, yes, we
Okay.
can do that.
I just wanted
No, I
to,
think
I
it's
thought it was
a
a
great
really
point,
good point. I hadn't thought about that, so.
Well, it makes me wonder if
Words
there's
mean things,
some kind of statutory direction even.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
our funds go outside,
Right.
But that's a really good point. Further discussion? Further discussion. If not, Director Barajas has proposed an action to clarify our intent as printed in the report. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you. Thank you. Council members, discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Thanks for that good discussion at the end. And with that, we have completed our agenda today. Michelle, anything else?
I just want to remind council members that our last Community Development Committee meeting will be December 19th. So just let me know if you're not available.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Barajas, anything else for the group? Okay. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.